Welcome to Millennium Counseling Center's podcast, where each week we go in depth into all things mental health, addiction recovery, and being our healthiest and happiest self. Enjoy. Hey, Dee, so one of the things that I hear in a lot of sessions is, do I need to work the 12 steps? And I think sometimes that question comes up in terms of like, do I need to do it to stay sober? Do I need to do it to really maximize my chances of getting healthy, proving to other people that I'm taking this seriously? What are your thoughts around this? And what are you seeing with your clients that are in recovery?
I think that, there's a lot of different opinions on 12-step and how people react to that. And I think that typically what you see is that a lot of it makes sense to people, and there's things about it that people can see as really important. But I think it's usually people getting caught up on things that they don't agree with or that doesn't make sense to them. So that it's not so much that people don't see value in it, but there's very specific things about different parts of 12-step that may not align with the person, the way that they think or feel. And so then the idea that I have to do all of these things, and that's the only possible way for me to get healthy, and then there's a piece in there that they're conflicted about, then typically people get caught up on those things, and then it makes it difficult for them to take out the positive things from the lessons and the ideas and the pathway that kind of 12-step lays out.
Yeah. So, I heard a couple different things there, but from your perspective, what are the benefits? What comes out of somebody taking the time and dedicating themselves to doing the 12 steps? What are the benefits?
Well, I use an analogy because I think sometimes this makes sense to people, is that there's a lot of different benefits. There's self-reflection, there's community, there's routine, there's structure, there's a roadmap. Those are all benefits that come with 12-step. And there's a method that for, 100 years at this point has proven to be, life-changing and game-changing for a lot of people. What I will generally do with somebody, if they are adamant that they don't want to do 12-step work, but they do want to live in recovery, then what we do is we break out those same things. So what we do is look at, okay, so what does 12-step provide? What is the benefits of it? And if you're saying, I don't want to do that, I don't want to do 12-step, then, how do we get these in other places? So the example I use is if instead of saying I wanted to live in recovery, somebody said, I want to get fit. And you said, well, here's how you get fit. You get a trainer, you join a gym, you have a nutritionist, and you change your diet and your exercise habits. And then you say, well, what if I don't want a trainer and a gym? What if I don't want to join a gym and I really hate working with trainers? Is there still a way for me to get fit? And the answer for the most part is yes, but it does have to be, if you're going to do that, then there's several pieces that are important. You need to know and understand the things that you need to do to get fit. And then you also need to be motivated and structured enough to follow through on that and kind of mimic the things that a trainer and a gym would do. So I think that 12-step provides a lot of those things. It's like a free gym membership and a free trainer. So can you get fit without that? I believe you can. And I've seen a lot of people do that. I do think that the structure of 12-step is an easier way because it's already set up for you, but I don't think it has to be the only way. And there's different groups that provide a lot of really good structure and ideas. And so it doesn't necessarily need to be 12-step, although I'm somebody who believes 12-step is extremely helpful and can be life-changing for people. But I don't think that that's the only way you can get there. I just think it's more complicated, and it has to be really well thought out if you don't want to do that, to make sure that you're getting those same benefits in other ways.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that you're kind of talking around is if somebody says, I don't want to do the 12-step, and I guess clarifying that a little bit, it's going to 12-step meetings and also not wanting to engage in the 12-step process.
And a sponsor. And
yeah, doing all those things is kind of differentiating. Is somebody saying, hey, look, I'm dedicated and willing. I just don't want to do it this way. Or am I saying this because I really don't have the motivation or dedication to do this? And so that part is a very kind of interesting kind of discerning process, because if you are presenting other options and there is still some pushback or there isn't kind of a level of engagement, what do you do then?
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the helpful things when I'm working with somebody. If they say, hey, listen, I really want to get everything I possibly can out of recovery, and I'm willing to put in the work and I'm willing to do what it takes. But for some particular reason, I am resistant to 12 step, then that's where we can kind of look at what they're resistant to. What is it about that? And sometimes it's personal experiences, sometimes it's philosophical, sometimes it can be around spirituality. So I do think it at the end of the day, it really boils down, because you can also have somebody who goes to 12 step meetings all the time, who actually has a sponsor and does the 12 steps, but isn't truly engaged in it. And if you're not, then, there's a saying, fake it till you make it, which there's some truth to. And at the same time, for people to really get the benefit out of any of these things, you really do need to be truly engaged. And, I love the word curious. You need to be curious as to, what am I getting out of this? What can I expect from that? And what is necessary for me to get those things? And if somebody's willing to look at those things and talk through those things, then the likelihood that we'll be able to find a pathway for them is pretty high. If they're not, then I don't know that it's not necessary that 12 step is going to do something that anything else couldn't, if the person isn't truly engaged and really wants to put in the work.
Yeah. Well, and something that you talked about earlier is if somebody is forced or being told that they need to get sober from something external, a work scenario, a relationship, a family member, and then they go into the 12 step room and now they're being told, hey, you need to do these things. It almost feels like, from all angles, you're kind of being kind of forced to take these steps. If you're new to a 12 step community, what are ways to kind of look out for that and to speak to that if that's happening, even if you still want to participate, but maybe in a way that doesn't feel like you're being kind of ordered or kind of told if you don't do it this way, then you're not really committed or it's not going to work.
Yeah, I think it's a fine line, right? Because what we know is that a lot of people in early recovery are somewhat resistant. So there's truth that that resistance can get in your way and can keep you from making the progress you're looking to make. I believe that the best way to do that is to talk through that with somebody who really understands 12 step, whether it's a sponsor or whether it's a friend or whether it's a therapist, whoever that is, somebody who really understands that and can help you understand, kind of what all this means. One of the things I do with people is I take them through the 12 steps in not as written from the book, and explain like, okay, so here's why step one is necessary. Here's why step two is important. And, I think a lot of it is that, to your point, I think it's people not necessarily fully understanding what the intent is, and then just being told that, stop fighting, just do this, put your head down and do the work. I think it's the balance between those two. There's a piece of this where you have to put your head down and do the work. And there's a piece of it where if you have a better understanding of it and you're more comfortable with what the pathway looks like, then you're more likely to want to engage in that. So I think that the more we try to, go from approach of just do it because I told you to, that tends to not work that well with any of us for anything.
Well, yeah. And I think with the clients that I see that are doing 12 step, just because you go to one meeting and someone says, hey, I could be a temporary sponsor or a sponsor for you, or hey, let's stay in touch, that doesn't necessarily mean that that person is going to be the best fit to help you. And so I think that it's important, especially in the earlier stages, that I suggest to clients is try out a lot of different places and, hear from a lot of different sources of how they're approaching it and what's helping. Because after a while, you're probably going to resonate with somebody. Someone's walked the path that you're on and seeing it the way that maybe you're seeing it. And that's going to be, I think, important to realize that after going to one or two meetings and hearing from just a few people, you may not necessarily kind of find your people yet.
Yeah. And, all 12 step meetings are operated independently, right? They work off of a similar structure, but they're run by different people. Their structure of their meetings are different. And I think in Chicago, there's something like 5,000 different meetings, right? So not everybody is going to find the same meetings helpful. I might have a certain style or type of philosophy of those folks in that meeting that I'm going to connect with better than others. And so I think if you're in a big community like Chicago, there's something for everyone, but it does take a little trial and error to find those things. And that's where sometimes people who have been in the recovery community can be really helpful because they can suggest ways to streamline that process and they can say, okay, here's what you're looking for. But again, it really goes back to this balance of it's finding that the willingness and openness to understand things and also not get caught on the rigidity, which sometimes it can feels like to people. So it's a fine balance between finding that. And I think the same thing is true with a sponsor. Like you need someone who's going to be reliable and help keep you accountable and available. And at the same time, it should be someone that you like to talk to, right? The idea is that this is who you're going to talk to when you really need someone. And if you dislike that person or you just don't like talking to them at all, then that's probably not going to go very well. So I think finding someone, what I tell people about sponsorship is find someone that looks like they have what you want and they look like their life is in a place that looks pretty good to you, and also someone that you can respect and actually want to talk to around easy and hard things.
Yeah. And I guess one other thing that I hear from a lot of people is around the statistics, right? The statistics of the effectiveness of the 12-step program as it is today versus maybe what it was a long time ago. And I think that whether that's used as kind of a crutch for not wanting to do anything or to just question whether or not this modality actually carries the level of effectiveness that people are trying to say that it does. How do you help somebody who's kind of in that, does this really work mindset?
Well, I guess two things. Statistics in the recovery world is a really variable concept, right? It's all self-report, right? That's how you get that information is by what people are saying. And it's really hard to track. And it also depends on what you consider success and what you consider not success. And what I look at success is if somebody has an understanding that a life of recovery is the better way for them to live and they're willing to continue to try to find that, then I think there's been a successful job of helping that person get past the hardest part, which is to address it and look at it. I think that the statistics around a lot of substance abuse and things like that they're not great statistics, right? The numbers aren't great. But what I tell people all the time is I say, there is a pathway here. There's a way to do it. So regardless of whatever the statistics are, there is a pathway and there's a roadmap for you to walk on. And if you do that, if you follow that roadmap, and this is true, I've never seen someone who has followed that path and hasn't been able to ultimately find a life of recovery and sobriety. Now, the question is, what does that roadmap look like? And is someone willing to try to figure that out and to try to understand that? And if they are, then whether it's 12-step or whether it's SMART or whether it's through a church or whether it's through a sponsor, and if they're willing to stick it out and really try to find what many people have found, then there's a way to get there. It might be a little windy at first, but it's the willingness, I think, that for me is really willingness and understanding. If there's willingness and understanding and, being willing to do some uncomfortable things that are hard.